Hello, it's Dawn Michelle. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about all the things that I got up to in March of 2025 because I did a whole planner video. So we're going to skip that portion of the monthly show and tell this month because I did a whole video flipping through the whole first 3 months in my daily planner. So I'll leave a link for that below if you missed it, want to check it out. So I did make some notes because I have a terrible memory when it comes to like remembering fun things that happen or important things that happen, which is why I am a planner and why I write everything down, because that is the only way that I can remember what actually happened in any given day. But there were a few sort of key things that were really exciting in March. One being that Tegan and I did the next installment of our Tarot Beyond Tradition series, and we showed our, I don't want to say top 5, but we each picked 5 non-traditional tarot decks and we discussed why we think they're non-traditional. Of course, it's always like up to interpretation, but it was really fun to get together and to be able to chat. We have a lot of the same decks when we're looking at non-traditional decks, so we tried to pick, you know, different decks to make sure that we had like 10 and there was no repeats. Although when it was a deck that Tegan and I both had, it was a great discussion around like why we both have that deck. We did go off on a little tangent about the World of Warcraft tarot. That totally my bad. It's like, y'all know, I got feels about this deck. I still use it, but I got feels about it. Tegan was so kind to clip out and did this like beautiful little clip show of some of the things that get removed out of our conversations, and one of those was my rant on the World of Warcraft deck, and we both posted those in our member spaces. So mine's here in my membership space here on YouTube, and Tegan's is over, I believe, in her Patreon. It was really fun to like have that little clip video because like, yeah, we get together and we're like hanging out for like 3-4 hours. What you end up seeing in the episodes is us trying to curtail our crazy, rambly, all over the place chats, which are the most fun. Getting together to chat with Tegan every month is like a highlight of my month. Whether or not we're recording, we're just chatting and hanging out. It's always so much fun. Oh, another chat that I got to have here on my channel was getting together with Tara from Cozy Core, and we chatted about just kind of like all kinds of things. We chatted a lot about Gamify. We chatted some about writing. That was really fun. I so enjoy hanging out with Tara. We both have a shared passion for writing, so it's really fun to be able to get together and chat and to, you know, also talk about tarot and how we integrate that into our writing life, as well as, you know, just discussing how our Gamify is going, because we're both doing Gamify Our Life this year. I guess I had a lot of chats because then Lisa and I had a chat over on my Twitch channel. I think it might be down by now because videos only stay up for 2 weeks on Twitch. That's just how it goes over there. And I do try to clip things out and put it over on my gaming YouTube channel when I get a chance to, but I don't have that full thing clipped out yet. There's a part of it of Lisa and I talking about playing evil. So we had I think it was almost a 3-hour discussion, having a really honest discussion about gaming, about role play, and about how, you know, we as players and as people come at that process and some of the things that we've learned. We are intending to do that every so often over on my Twitch channel. We're just going to get together. It's no gaming, just Lisa and I hanging out, talking about kind of the real side of gaming, like the other side of it, right? What happens when you are playing characters and personal things come up, and growth moments that we've had in game. And it was a really wonderful discussion. If I haven't yet already, I will try to clip out more of that to put over on my gaming YouTube channel as well. Here on my channel, I brought back my Mod With Me series, which was really fun. I didn't realize kind of how much I miss doing deck mods. I don't always have time because they do take a lot of time, so I don't always have time to do them anymore, but I definitely have a few planned for the future, so that's going to be kind of coming back into rotation on my channel, because I know a lot of you reached out and said you missed them too, so I'm happy to bring them back. Shared a bit about my planner this month and how that process is going, and really how it's evolved over the last few months, because that's always a changing thing. It's like my tarot practice. Nothing ever stays static because it all reflects my real life, and my real life changes from day to day. So it's really cool to be able to like sit down and reflect on that and just kind of share that. There's been quite a bit going on in my membership too. We're going through the Enchanted library. You'll see that when I show you that tarot journal and the decks that I work with in that practice. I've also been going through my deck collection in my membership space. My deck collection is just a hot mess right now, and I don't know where anything is. We redid a bunch of rooms in our house, this room being one of them, and I got frustrated through the process and really overwhelmed. And so I just ended up throwing a bunch of stuff like everywhere. I couldn't tell you most of what's on my shelves behind me. There's a bunch of stuff in the closet. And so I've been in my member space just sitting down and like having a chat and looking at the decks in my collection and trying to figure out like, why do I have this? Do I still need it? What purpose does it serve? And so that's been really fun. We've done a couple live chats. I have some really big projects I've been working on over the last few months. And so I'm excited to start to bring those out and share them with you all. And then I've got some even bigger projects in the works. So I'll be hopefully able to share with those maybe a little bit later on in the year. But it's been a really, really busy month. I did so much work this month, more work than probably play. I know it's hard to imagine because like a lot of what you see is my play stuff, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes in all of that. So yeah, it was a really fun month, even though it was a really, really busy one, a little bit chaotic, but it was a great month. And I really enjoyed getting to spend a lot of extra time with people and have those really, really deep and engaging chats. Definitely something that I'd like to continue to do moving forward. So I think that wraps it up for kind of like memories and whatnots throughout March. And I guess I talked a little bit about what's coming in April too. But let's go ahead and turn the camera around and we are going to take a look at the decks that I worked with all throughout the month. So even though we're not really going to flip through my planner this month because I did the whole video on it, again, link for that below if you want to check out the whole pretty much first 3 months of my planner and how I go about that. This is also my tarot journal for just sort of everyday on the fly readings, as well as my wisdom readings and my wild magic readings. So all of that is in here, but I don't want to just repeat the same information. So we'll talk about the deck that I used for my daily practice along with the tarot that I incorporated in with that. I'm not going to talk about my wisdom decks this particular month because it is the same decks that I was using last month. That Darkness of Light with the Dante's Inferno, those are my Hades decks. The Tarot Persephone's Garden with the Flower Oracle, those are my Persephone decks. I did end up pulling in the Memento Mori and the Lost Oracle into that mix a little bit this month. Again, I do believe those are decks that I talked about last month as well. And my Wild Magic, I'm not going to talk about those decks again because I'm still using the World of Warcraft and the Moon deck. However, I am probably going to switch out my Wild Magic decks in April, and I'm definitely doing some different things with my Wisdom readings in April as well. So we'll be seeing something different there next month. But for this month, we're not going to go into those because it is the same decks that I've shown the last 2 months. And I do have some other decks that I want to talk about because I did switch my Gamify decks and there were some other decks that I pulled into practice for various things. So we'll go ahead and take a look at all of those. So let's start with the deck that I used for my daily draw practice, which is something I've been doing, I think, pretty much all this year. And I used the Apothecary Spirits Oracle for this for all throughout March. This is a fairly new deck, I do believe, by one of my favorite illustrators. So of course, when Eric reached out to see if I wanted to give it a look, I was more than happy to oblige. I love the backs. The edges are this gorgeous matte green. This is such a beautiful deck. I think I showed it when I talked about the week in my practice. That was a video that I did this month, and I talked about working with this one for daily card pulls and some of the different readings that I've done with it. I have really been enjoying my work with this deck. I've been using it for daily card pulls primarily, and I do definitely get into the guidebook. I sort of doodle the little plant in my weird little doodly way in my planner, and then I'm writing keywords and also pulling in some messages from the guidebook to kind of just help guide me throughout the day. Sometimes there actually end up being sort of prompts that lead me into other readings as well, things that I need to work on, things that I want to think about or reflect on. It's such a gorgeous deck. I really, really love Eric's art style, and I really have been enjoying my work with it. I did see that Lisa wrote keywords on hers, and I'm tempted to do that with my copy as well, just so that it makes it just a tiny bit more accessible for me, because I don't know anything really about these plants. But I have really been enjoying learning about the plants through working with the guidebook, and that daily card pull really helps me to kind of tap into that work. One of the things I've also been doing with this deck is working with it along with my Tarot de Carlotides, which is one of my favorite little decks in my collection. I think I've shown this one quite a bit. I really love the sort of mix of fairy tale with more modern imagery and modern pop culture associations. It's kind of this really unique little blend. It exists in this kind of fantasy-esque world that I feel like kind of reflects a little bit about how I see fantasy. There's like a blend between fantasy and reality. And I don't, like, that sounds really weird when I say that out loud, but hopefully you know what I mean. I bring a lot of fantasy into my reality and a lot of reality into my fantasy. So that's kind of what I mean by that. Hopefully that clarifies. But I've really been enjoying working with these two together. I've done let's move the little guidebook. So in addition to working with just the decks and the messages that come through, I was also doing some color association work with these two decks, which was really lovely. I think I showed that again in that week in my practice video where I had all the cards that I pulled out for the week, and then I pulled my tarot cards in relation to where the color correspondences showed up for me. And that was a really great practice. It was really interesting to blend those two decks together. I'm not sure why I thought to pair these two. I do think that aesthetically they're quite beautiful together, but they're two very different energies. We have like real plants with like real healing medicine mixed with this sort of fantasy, pop culture-y kind of world in the Tarot de Carlotides. And I really just love the way that they work together. I think the illustration styles are really compatible. The colors are really where it's at for me with this little pairing. Doing those sort of color readings was really interesting. But like if you look here, we've got this primarily pink card. We've got the pink in the Irish moss, also in the moon, and then the pink here in the flower arrangement in the Four of Pentacles. And that tends to be how I work with these two together quite a bit, is I'm looking for where is the color flow across the two decks. And in this instance, what does the sort of lack of a color flow, and can I find some other connection between the cards? So it's just a really interesting way to work with the decks and work with the readings when we're not necessarily just really honed in on, you know, this is the Chariot and this is the Knight of Pentacles and we have the Lavender, and we're just really just looking at those sort of base messages. This allows me to dive a little bit deeper because I'm looking more at like, where does the color lead me? What does that make me think of? Color work is really interesting. I really enjoy working with it. I don't know that I've ever talked about it like really in depth, but like here that we've got this kind of yellow gold coloring going on. So we've got it sort of in the little fountain thing here, teapot with the two cups. The kettle itself, and what a beautiful message this is. And then we've got the gold, obviously in the card itself, but also in the sun. When I'm looking at those particular elements and I'm really tying into those colors, this is like telling me, like, take a moment and enjoy like some quality time with somebody that I care about or that I love. Like it's really inviting that sort of energy into my world. And I can tie in the plant energy as well from the Apothecary Oracle and the messages from the guidebook, because they're quite lovely. And I really have been enjoying working with it, and just it's on its own as a daily card pull. But this has been a really interesting practice, just pulling these two decks together, doing these readings, but really honing into those color shifts. So another little sort of random pairing that I've been working with this month is the Death Doula with the Line Strider Tarot. And this is an interesting one because it came up for me in a daily card with the Apothecary Spirits, and I got a sort of cleansing purge card. And it just really made me think that, yeah, I could use a little bit of that energy in my life right now. So that one card definitely prompted me to pull out and look for a deck to do, or deck pairing to do some clearing readings with. And then I've done that a couple of times throughout the month as I've been, you know, kind of like overloaded with energy. I really enjoyed the Death Doula for this process because it was kind of like bringing like some closure to some things. It was clearing away some sort of like stuck energy, or like honestly some dead energy that just needed to go. I do really like the keywords on this deck. This is a photographic deck, but it works really well with the Line Strider. Their energies blend together really well, even though they are two very different art styles. But I really like the keywords. I do get into the guidebook from time to time with this deck, but I honestly don't need it most of the time, which, like, I know, broken record, but is my preference with an oracle. I want it to be there when I want it, but I don't want it to be required reading to work with the deck. This deck, I really enjoy working with it. I most often use it with my Somnia and my Black Madonna Tarot, but it works really well with the Line Strider because neither one of those decks, the Somnia or Black Madonna, really felt like a clearing deck. So I wanted something to help sort of tap into this message and expand upon it a little bit further. So I pulled out my line strider because this deck, with all of its white space and its beautiful but very simple illustrative style, or really I think this is watercolor, but it's simple imagery, that doesn't mean that it lacks depth, because I absolutely find a lot of depth in this deck, but it's the white space that really creates this sort of breathing room in a reading, and it really helps me to slow down and to look at like, what do I need to clear away and how can I best like incorporate that into this work with the death doula. And I think even aesthetically speaking, like the white borders on the death doula with the very predominant white background in the line strider work really well together. It creates a lot of breathing room. Now I often did more than 3 cards with this, so I had just the one death doula card as the central focal point, but then I would pull in a couple of different line strider cards just to kind of really dive into sort of different aspects of where I could attune that clearing and that purging energy. Like we have the sun with the magician and the wheel of fortune. That's beautiful. I really enjoyed this practice. It was a great one for when I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed by things and when I was feeling a little bit emotionally charged. So it really came in handy multiple times throughout the month, because it was a great one for like, yeah, I just want to clear out like whatever stuck energy is there, right? Just like nothing super deep, nothing super, you know, triggering or anything like that. Like just pull out a few cards, throw them on the table. Like, where is my energy stuck and how can I clear it away? It worked beautifully for that. But then there were a few sort of challenging times throughout the month where I was very emotionally charged, and I came to this deck and pulled it out as well and was just like, okay, how do I clear this away? This is very heavy. It's very emotional. And it like in complete opposite of how I had been using it, which is just like a generic, like, let's just do a little cleansing reading, right? Nothing big, nothing exciting, just a general, like getting rid of some stuck energy. But then to use it for like really deep, heavy, emotional energies, it worked really well for that, because it kind of took me out of that overly sensitive emotional state that I was in that wasn't necessarily serving me in the moment. And it really helped me to look at like, okay, how can I deal with this? Well, I need to have a little bit of grace. And I've got the Knight of Cups and the Knight of Pentacles. It did a really good job of just toning things down a little bit and letting me get like a little bit of space and perspective on things, letting me just take a beat, take a moment, take a breath. And it worked really beautifully for that. So I was really impressed with this pairing, because it had the ability to just kind of do the sort of just mundane everyday sort of reading, just like, hey, just throw some cards down and like, let's see what's up. We got regeneration with the 8 of Wands and the 5 of Cups. Beautiful. The colors, I think actually, even though it's 2 different art styles, I think the colors work really well together. But I was really impressed with how it was able to really do that, as well as to help me through some, you know, bigger, deeper, emotionally charged energies that was going on in my life at the time. So moving along, let's talk about the decks that I use for my Gamify My Life process. This is a process that I'm doing to just kind of keep track of my personal habits and goals and things like that. And every month I am doing, or every week I guess I should say, I'm doing tarot readings around that. I have to earn my cards as part of my Gamify. I'm not going to go too much into detail about how it all works, because I have a whole video, which I will leave linked in the description box below. But I did end up switching out my decks for March. So I used the same selection of decks in January and February. So March, and probably my plan is in April, March and April, I'm going to be using this selection of 5 decks here. So I'm going to move those aside. We'll take a look at those here in a moment. Let's pop into my Gamify just so you can kind of see what I've been doing in here. So just for real quick reference, I am tracking 5 different areas of my life, which all correlate to the 5 decks that I've got here. I've got Vitality, which is my health and wellness, Insight, which is my personal growth, Charisma, which is relationships, Wisdom is spirituality, and Dexterity is work. Everything is color coded, although I did switch my color codes for Dexterity in March because they aligned better with what I was doing in my daily planner. So I'm not going to do a real in-depth flip through of this, because it's basically the same process every single week. Every Monday I go back and I look at the week previous in my daily planner, and then I track and record how many points I got in each category. So did I do, you know, my vitality things? Did I do insight things, charisma things? Again, it's all color coded, and then I'm adding up the points here. I'll do maybe a bigger, better check-in with this process here in its own separate video for for those of you that are interested. And then basically I do a reading. So I have to earn the card. So if I get at least 1 point in each category, I get to earn a card from the associated deck, and then I get to use that as a reading. Now these readings are sort of double duty for me. I am looking at, last week because this is what I'm tracking, but it also gives me sort of some guidelines for what I need to be focusing on and looking at moving forward into the next week. So I've really been enjoying this process. You can see it's basically just the same week after week. So again, I'll do a better in-depth video on that if anybody's interested. Definitely let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more information or a little check-in with my Gamify. I can certainly do that. But I do like to talk about the decks that I used. So let's start with this big one here. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen some of these spreads and these cards together. They are beautiful. This is the Feminine Wisdom Oracle. And I really have been enjoying this deck. I've been using it as my wisdom deck. So wisdom is anything that relates to spirituality. So when I do work and I make progress in that category of my life, I get to pull a wisdom card. The backs are really beautiful on this deck. It's got shiny gold gilding. Like, y'all know how I feel about that. But actually, the rock pool gilding really doesn't bother me that much. It seems to hold up really well. I really enjoy the artwork in this deck. I think it's really beautiful. We've got kind of an overarching keyword and then some additional keywords or key phrases on the bottom. That setup works really well for me. There are only, I believe, 36 cards in this deck. Let's just take a peek because I don't want to misspeak. But I'm pretty sure there's only 36. And like, I'll be honest, that is really teetering on the edge of, are you worth my money? Like, I'm just gonna be honest about it. Generally, Rockpool does 44, and that's like really the lowest I ever really want to see because it's not very many cards. And if you're using them frequently, or if you're using them like in a daily card pull or something like that, you're gonna get repeats like a lot. So it works fine for this practice for me because I really only pulled four or five cards. Can't remember how many weeks there were in March, but I really only pulled 4 or 5 cards for the whole month, as I'm just pulling 1 card a week. But it worked really beautifully for just kind of summing up like what my wisdom practice kind of represented that week and what I need to focus on moving forward. I have noticed the gilding wraps around the top of the decks, and that doesn't throw me. It's the problem with metallic gilding. And I really wish it wasn't a thing anymore, but I know that's a very me thing. But anyway, I did really enjoy working with this deck. I think the art is really beautiful. It definitely has like a vibe. There's clearly a vibe going on here with this deck, and really with this whole selection of decks I have together. I bought this deck specifically because it sort of sat in alignment with these other decks that I was looking at using for my Gamify. So I specifically bought this one to be sort of part of this whole process. I don't know if it's one that I would have just picked up, just seeing and just picked up. Although I think the art is really beautiful. I do have lots of other decks that really, tie into feminine spirituality, feminine wisdom, things like that. And so I don't know that I would have necessarily picked it up. And like, I'll be honest, only having 36 cards is generally like, I'm going to pass on that if it wasn't for the fact that I specifically wanted it to use it with this collection of decks. So like, just, honest review of my thoughts and opinions on the deck. Like, there's so few, I can flip through the whole thing in one sitting here. It's a beautiful deck. I really enjoyed it. Like, I'll be honest, I didn't get into the guidebook because I didn't really need it too much with what I had, with the other decks that I had in this whole collection. It does have key phrases here. There's just a little blurb. It's not too much. It's not overly written, which is really nice. And then we just have a couple of affirmations. It's a lovely little guidebook. But like, full disclosure and honesty, because this is basically a review of all the decks that I've worked with this month, I didn't actually use the guidebook. So I can't actually speak to the guidebook. So the one deck that has stayed from the previous 2 months is the Energy Archaeology Oracle. I talked about this deck quite a bit in the last 2-month reviews, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail in this one, but it is part of this whole collection that I've got going on. See? Matte gold gilding, so much better. So much better. This is a beautiful deck. I really enjoy working with this deck. I specifically, when I started off with the whole Gamify thing and I was deciding to choose decks and pick decks to represent those different key areas of my life, did I mention that this was my vitality deck? I think I forgot that key piece of information. But I started with this deck because that was the main portion of my life, or the main category that I really wanted to focus on this year was vitality, you know, health and wellness. And so I picked this deck first, and I was kind of letting all the other decks that I chose wrap around that, but still like relate to the categories as best as they could. So I decided to keep this one because it did work fairly well with the rest of the decks that I had picked out, but it just like, it is all about like the body, so, and the bones and the kind of like support structure of the inner self in that way. And so it works really well as a vitality deck. I do get into the guidebook with this one because the guidebook is lovely and it has some really wonderful information in it. Again, I won't drag that out because I'm pretty sure I've shown that in many other videos now at this point. But this is still my vitality deck currently. Not to say that it won't change at some point, but still currently my vitality deck. So the deck that I'm using for my charisma readings, which is anything to do around relationships, is the Gamify Tarot. Aesthetically speaking, it worked so beautifully with everything else that I had on the table, because I think this was the last deck that I chose. I chose all of these in a member video because I do a video every month where I basically look at all the new decks that I had and come into my collection. And 2 of the decks that are in this selection here were new to me at the beginning of March. And so I wanted to match that, and I ended up pulling this one in. And I wasn't really sure if it was going to really align with sort of that charisma energy, the relationships. That's just what I call that category in my Gamify. But actually it worked really well. This is turning out to be a very versatile tarot. I really love the aesthetics of it, but I also love the sort of simplistic, and I mean that in like the best possible way, pip style nature of the deck. It just reads really beautifully. It's just very clear. It's really easy for me to understand and work with. I don't really struggle too much with the messages, and it's open enough that allows me to read tarot in the way that I enjoy reading it, which is a little bit more numerologically, a little bit more elementally, like honestly a little bit more pip style. So the deck I used for dexterity, so all of my work related prompts and energy and reading, was the Dreamers deck. And this is just a random deck I happened to find on Amazon. It was in those, I think, you know, people also bought this kind of thing, and I saw it and I was like, there's a particular deck. I think this was the start of it all. There was a particular deck that I have that we're going to look at next in my collection that this made me think of. This is absolutely an affirmation deck, and it is fairly geared toward the idea of like work and creative work and like, what do they call that? Soul work, and kind of doing that kind of thing. It's kind of in alignment with that. I think it even says somewhere, and yeah, affirmations for pursuing your dreams. So there's 40 cards in this one. So the languaging on this is definitely what I tend to call like scripted language. So it is like I am, I know, like envisioning things as if they're already a part of your life, as though they've already happened. And so it definitely has that sort of languaging, which isn't always my jam, but I really have enjoyed it. The statements on it are really quite good. Like this one is, I know that all the wisdom I need to make the right decision lies within me. I am intuitive. And I was definitely tuning into those messages in my Gamify readings. So like this one is, I know I am the only one who determines what is and isn't right for me. I am the final say. It's just, it has some really great messages. Like I'm capable, I'm choosing joy, I'm doing the work, I am worthy, I'm happy. There's one that was like something about play. This is a good one. I'm never stuck. Nothing bad lasts forever, even when my emotions tell me otherwise. Like it's just a really great deck for that. I feel like I can definitely find other places to use it in my collection and in my practice, but for right now, it is definitely serving the place as my dexterity deck, so related to work, because it's providing that energy, but also that sort of affirmative, imagine it as if it were already happening type of energy, which works really well for dexterity or work related things for me. So the last deck in my little collection of Gamify is actually this little Mesquite Tarot. And this was kind of, I do believe, it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure that this was the deck that kind of kicked this whole little collection off, because I got this deck and I was like, this is gonna work beautifully with this. It also works beautifully with this. Like all these decks work really well together. This is a out of print indie deck. It's a little mini deck. I have edged mine in this like pale green. And I will say that it's incredibly hard to find. I happened to get it many years ago when it was actually still in print, but I have heard of other people and been contacted by other people trying to get a hold of it. I do not know how to get a hold of this deck. The creators have said many times that they're going to bring it back, but that hasn't happened yet. I really hope they do because it's a gorgeous pip deck. I really love working with this one. It has a really great energy to it. It definitely has this sort of soft, kind of hold your hand energy to it. It reminds me a little bit, like I would say, even though it's animals, I would say it has a similar energy to like the White Sage Tarot. I prefer this one just because I'm not real huge into animal energy. So this works a little bit better for me, but it's kind of in that same vein. So like if you can't get this one, maybe consider the White Sage Tarot if you're cool with animal energy. That's a beautiful deck. I've used it a lot. It's in my bedtime basket, so I do still work with it there. But if I'm doing this kind of work in this space, this is where I'm at. I really, really love working with this deck, and like it works beautifully with all of these. Usually I do like my wisdom deck up top and my vitality deck underneath. This is kind of like the above and below, right? The wisdom is the spiritual, the vitality is like the health and wellness in the body and all of that good stuff. And then I think I was doing my dexterity over here and my insight, and then I had my charisma deck over here. How I lay these cards down every week, it kind of changes. It just depends on, you know, how I'm feeling and where I feel like the cards need to be. It's not like a hard set rule as to where and how I put them on the table. Let's see if I can do this with so many different cards. But I think they work really well together. I'm just going to flip through a few of these because this is not the best way to, you know, show cards, is to be flipping through this many at one time. But like it really does work well for my Gamify because I have like the wisdom with the spiritual and the above, the body, the vitality, the, you know, physical self. I have my relationships over here, my work and insight. Often those two things are in alignment. So I really like to put those together, and so that they sit on the table in a similar space, as I know that in my mind they're often connected. But I feel like the decks really worked well together for my little Gamify. So now let's talk about what I did in the decks that I used in my journal for the Enchanted library, which is the guided tarot practice that I'm doing here in the membership on my channel. This is the little journal that I'm using. I'm going to jump into the journal first, as maybe it'll give some context around the decks that I chose and why I chose them. I am using this journal to record all of my readings for this particular work, and that's the only thing that's in here. I did end up adding a table of contents, and I've just got a basic list of each of the decks that I've used for each of the months. So for March, our practice was the glass slipper, and this was loosely based on the story of Cinderella. So every month begins with a short narrative where we begin in the Enchanted library, and then we transition into the story and the work that we're doing there. I have just been writing down the narrative as it is in the PDF that I provide to everybody every month. I've got some stickers in here. I have been providing sticker sheets now for all my members from all the little cute little imagery that gets put into the PDFs. So I've got the story here with my stickers. Every month we roll our D20 to get an archetypal energy to walk with during the experience throughout the month. And then we also usually begin by pulling a few cards from our caretaker, who's kind of like our guide on this journey, to get a message for kind of what we need to be aware of this month as we're going into this work. So each week we have a main question, we pull our oracle cards, and then we have some tarot prompts, a spread around that with some very specific questions. And then there's the enchantment portion of the practice, which oftentimes incorporates things like dice casting or other elements of interactivity into the practice. So I've been doing just real simple, the pictures of my readings, to just give it a little pop of character, bring some of that energy onto the page. But I am trying to focus more on the work itself and less on the decorative elements because I really want to dive into the practice. This month we did also have a side quest. So in between weeks 3 and 4, there was an additional activity to be done, which was more interactive. And it was looking at the energies of the wicked stepmother and the fairy godmother. That was a really fun one. And there we go into the last week. So again, keeping it pretty stripped back, just incorporating a few decorative touches, but that kind of shows you a little bit about the process and the setup for each of the weeks. So I do have to say that I had an absolute blast working with my library decks this month. They were so much fun. It was such an impromptu pairing and pulling them together, and they worked so beautifully. So I was using the Pear Tree Court by the beautiful Danny Mystic. I love this oracle. It's one of my favorites. I do keep the little guide in here because like I almost always pull messages from the guide because they're just, you know, they're clever. I really enjoy them. This is a beautiful, beautiful deck. It worked so well with these decks. I absolutely loved it. I love that we've got just like the succinct keyword. They're so smart. I really enjoy the little messages in the guidebook for them. But every week we pull sort of like an overarching narrative card to kind of guide the way along our journey that week in relation to the spreads and the enchantment, the activities that we're going to be doing. And this worked beautifully for that because I was able to pull a card, let it kind of create the narrative around the practice itself, pulling in those messages from the little guidebook, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful addition to my reading, or really kind of created the foundation for each of the readings. And then I used a combination of these two decks. So this is the, this one I'm gonna talk about first. Okay, I'm gonna talk about this one first because it's new and I'm real excited about this one. This is the Heavenly Soul Tarot deck. I just happened to stumble upon this one on Amazon. You know, it's just like in the recommended list or whatever. I think the guidebook is nice. I don't get into it, right? It's just a tarot, but it's got some great keywords and it's got an upright and reverse meaning, and it like has pretty much the same for all the cards, and it's a beautiful little guidebook. But like the magic for me with this deck is in these cards and this collage. I love that this one's on top. So this image is the reason I bought the deck. If you saw on my Instagram, I feel like I talked about this somewhere. It could have been, this is the thing about making videos. I don't know if it was in member space or if it was here publicly, but I have this print. This comes from a Life magazine cover from, I do believe, like the 20s, and I now have this print in my office. It was a whole thing. I did a post on Instagram about it because it was a whole moment for me. But anyway, I really love the collaging in this deck. There's just something about it that just every card just hits in a way that I so resonate with, and I do not struggle with the messages at all. And I really love the collage. It's really intentional. It's minimal where collage is concerned. I might even love it even more if it didn't have these like decorative borders around it, but they're not so intrusive that they bother me or that they keep me from working with the deck. But it's mixed media collage, and it's just done so beautifully. And I really love the intentionality that is put into this deck. In fact, I ended up buying another deck by this creator because I just wanted to see if my response and the connection would be the same, because I really just had like a really deep, profound connection to this deck when I first pulled it out. And then having done work with it and worked with it in my library practice, but also I've done other readings with it, and it just, I don't know, there's just something about it. I really thought this kind of an energy was going to be a really weird shift for me, because we have like some of these cards like have full scenic backgrounds and then the collaging on top of it, right? And then some of them have, there is still a scene back here, but it's barely visible. That they have these more spacious backgrounds, and then it's definitely more collagey in terms of what's, you know, how the placement is. There's a couple of cards like that, and there's definitely a blend of art styles in here. And I just think it's done so well. This is my favorite card. Okay, there's a couple of cards in this deck that are really my favorite. I love this Fool with the guy on the horse, the butterfly, and the planet. Like, to me, this is just like the levels of self, the levels of existence. Subconscious, conscious, superconscious, or like the above and the below, the spiritual, the body, like all that. All that is in that card, and I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorites. I will see if I can find... I love this Page of Cups with the mermaid. There's so many of these cards that I just really love the way it's collaged together. I don't know what it is about it, because like I've got a million collage decks, and I've been going through my deck collection with my members, and I definitely need to like gather up all my collage decks and see like what I've got and see if there's any repeating energy in this deck that I feel like is elsewhere. But this one, I don't know. It really just fits the bill for me. See, here's like a totally different look than this one. And I thought when these would come up in a reading together on the table, like it would be really jarring, but it's really not. They work really well together. Oh, here's my other favorite card in the deck. I love that. The Death card. She's in the shell, and she's like reaching for the Death Head Moth. I love the Moon card. Like, I love Three of Swords. Beautiful. I love so many cards in this deck. It's definitely like, it's taken me by surprise, because Like, let's be honest, it's just another collage deck. I have, I don't even know, a dozen or two or more collage decks. I have so many of them. Like, clearly, I really like collage, and I have a ton of them. But this one, I don't know, this one just really, really does something for me. I really, really love working with it. It is gilded, which again, not my favorite, but the gilding's nice. I haven't had any problems with it. Here's the backs, which are beautiful. So I just want to show you, let's talk about the other deck that I used. So I used this in the library practice as kind of like representing sort of like me or my character within this practice, right? And then I used the Hearthwood Tarot, and it's in this beautiful Crystal Haven bag, and I used this. Look at the backs. Oh, I love this deck too. I so love this deck. Okay, so I used this deck in my readings with the Heavenly Souls, which it was just such a random spur of the moment draw because I really love all the little mice, the little creatures in this deck. I think I've mentioned before, like, this deck makes me feel less alone and less afraid in a super chaotic, busy world that often feels like it moves too fast and like it's a dumpster fire, and it's a lot, right? The world is overwhelming right now. And this deck just, I don't know, it makes me feel like supported and comforted, and like it just, I don't know, has this cozy energy to it. Again, felt experience, right? Broken record. But what I ended up pulling this deck into the readings to kind of represent was sort of those other outside of us energies that support us and that bring us comfort and then take care of us. Because if you think about like Cinderella, the mice and some of the other animals were quite, you know, predominant in helping Cinderella, like, you know, finish her dress and things like that. And she had like her fairy godmother who was support for her and things like that. So this deck really represented those outside support energies, kind of like the external world, where I was using the Heavenly Souls to represent more the internal space. But like these together, this is such a weird, for me, I should say, I should like clarify. For me, this was such a weird pairing choice. I don't feel like they should go together, but they just so do. So let's just do a little, you know, playing with pairs. We are going to have the tarot in the center, but these decks together, just if you're looking at it from that context of representing the sort of inner space and the outer space and like what's going on within me and where can I find support for that. And I just really love the way they worked together. It was such a beautiful little combo, and they just, I don't know, something about it. Again, just one of these really weird pairings that I throw together and it just ends up working out really well. Again, this is tarot and tarot, so I am basically doing a 3-card reading at this point. And I love that sort of internal, external. Oh, I do have the extra cards in this deck because I think they're pretty cool. But like, look at this. We've got 2 8 of Pentacles. 2 8 of Pentacles with the 2 of Pentacles over here. So like internally we have 8 of Pentacle energy. Externally we have 8 of Pentacle energy. And then internally we have the 2 of Pentacles again. So this is really like, you need to bring those things into alignment. You need to bring your internal world and things that you're trying to create in alignment with what you're doing externally. Bring those together and get the support that you need, and it's going to be beautiful. It's going to make magic. I just really love them. Aren't they beautiful? Okay, just for fun, let's just switch them. So let's put the internal through the Heavenly Soul, which is really interesting because it's like Heavenly Soul. You would think that would be the external, but for me it wasn't. It could also be used, you know, in alignment with like the superconscious or, you know, with divine inspiration or things of that nature. These work really well this way too, because we can look at like, okay, what's going on externally? Where can I get support for that? And how can I internally also support myself? Or we could look at it is what's the internal situation, what's going on there, and how can I look to what's outside of me to help me navigate that. These are just really beautiful together. I really enjoyed the way that they came together, the way that they read. I really love working with the Hearthwood. It's definitely, like, I like the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, but like this one is my favorite. I have a much more personal connection to this one. And I think it's just because it's the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel seen and comforted and supported. And like the Oak Ash and Thorn is beautiful, but it doesn't have that quite of a personal layer to it for me. And I have really been enjoying the Heavenly Soul. Like I'm really like, it's definitely like there's that tag going around, decks I'm crushing on. That would be a fun one to do because I'm totally crushing on this deck right now. So yeah, these together are absolutely stunning. But, oh, look at this. Love it, beautiful. Okay, but let me show you one other thing. So real quick, because this is where it started for me. This, when I first got the Heavenly Souls, I was like, this is the oracle I'm gonna pair it with because they're just perfection together. So again, the Pear Tree Court Oracle paired with the Heavenly Souls. Like we'll just take a little flip through. I know I've kind of gone off on a tangent, not talking about my library practice anymore, but like I did it, you saw it. These are the decks I use, but like let's look at the pairings because that's so fun. These two decks together are amazing. So we have Caution, again, really strong focal point, really strong foundation to dive into this reading. Like where do I need to exercise a little caution? Well, I've got the Five of Cups and the Three of Cups. Definitely maybe some relationship things going on there where I need to exercise a little caution. It's my favorite card in the deck, as I've mentioned many times. So Nurture between the Six of Wands and the Devil. This Devil stalked me through most of the month. It came up in so many readings for me. That one in particular, not in any other decks, but just in this deck, the Devil stalked me. Ooh, Pursuit between the Star and Temperance. Isn't this gorgeous? I really love these together. I think they're just beautiful. We won't linger too long. Do I have any other decks? I don't think I do. So we just flip through a couple. We'll flip through a couple, just so we can see how they work together. Okay, let me just show you real quick, just because we're here, let me just show you real quick how I was doing, like how they all work together. So think of this as your focal point. This is your main like story for your, let me just do one. Maybe I just do one. Okay, so our main story energy is vision. And let's do, okay, so what do we need to know about vision? We're just gonna do a little impromptu. I don't even have a whole deck here, but that's okay. So let's pull, we'll just do two. Six of Swords and the Ace of Wands. Interesting. This is our main narrative for our little reading here with the, so having vision around Six of Swords, Ace of Wands. But now let's look at, let's use the Hearthwood to dive a little bit deeper into where we could find support in that vision for these cards. So we've got the Knight of Pentacles underneath the Six of Swords and the Four of Cups under the Ace of Wands. Look at that. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so then we could add, like we could pull another, like coming into the reading, this is what we need to know for the narrative to support it. I'm just having a play now. And then coming out of the reading, we have clarity. So this, creating this vision for our Six of Swords with the Knight of Pentacles, our Ace of Wands, and our Four of Cups, having this vision for these cards where we can find support for this energy, and then what's going to come out of this is clarity. I just really love the way that these work together. Again, it's a very specific way that I've like assigned sort of a theme or a purpose to these decks currently, but that's just because that's how it fits into how I was working with them throughout March. When I pull these decks into readings other times and with other, you know, other decks and in other spaces and areas of my practice, they'll mean something different. And I really love that about just working with tarot in general. So yeah, these three together were a very big hit for me in just in the month in general, but definitely in my library practice. I had some great readings working with that energy of Cinderella and then really diving into those messages for myself and looking at like where the support was coming from. It was beautiful. I do use dice casting because a lot of our enchantments, which is sort of the bonus activity, uses dice, and so I was just using these like clear kind of pearlescent ones with the gold lettering, so I felt like it just really worked with all of these. These are just cheapy Amazon dice. I think they were like $5. Nothing too terribly expensive there, but gorgeous little pairing. It was so much fun. I really enjoyed working with it. So there we have it, all the decks that I worked with, the practices, and some of the things that I got up to all throughout March of 2025. It was a great month for decks. I had a lot of really great new decks come into my collection that I really enjoyed my work with, really enjoyed getting to know. It's always fun to find new things that you can apply into your practice. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shared here in the description box of this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope that you had a wonderful March, and I wish you many blessings moving into April.